I think diversity of thought is one of the most important things to success of any organization. And so I think just thinking through, hey, what are the various perspectives on this particular topic? And then assimilating those down into making a decision is just a good way to make a decision.
You're listening to the Real Returns podcast, where we learn how real investments can make a real impact. Join your hosts, Andrew and Dan, as they share stories and interview business leaders on how real estate and other forms of investment can create meaningful change for individuals and communities around the world.
All right, welcome back to the Season 4 recap, another episode of the Real Returns podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Reichert. I've got my business partner and my co-host, Dan Croce here. Dan, can you believe it? We are done Season 4, and that wraps up 2 years doing podcasting together. So we've been business partners for 9 years, podcasting together for 2 years. What do you think? It's pretty crazy to think about.
Yeah, we've come a long way in a number of ways. And the podcast, I think we've got a lot better. It's been a lot of fun, but
this first couple were pretty bad. Let's be honest.
Yeah, they were really bad. And some of them are still not the best, but we're getting there.
We're figuring it out.
But I was thinking, remember that time you blamed me for completely ruining a podcast episode?
No, I don't remember this.
Well, you did. And I was thinking about it. I was like, maybe that's not fair. That's ridiculous. I didn't even remember that I was supposed to show up to a podcast recording. So how could I have ruined it? I wasn't even there.
Well, you probably ruined it because you weren't there, and I'm a horrible host by myself. So you probably did ruin it. But
I still got the dad joke in.
Yeah.
The episode recap or the season recap.
So. I like it. But there actually is one episode this season that you weren't on. But it's pretty cool that every single other episode this season we did together.
Yeah, it was fun. So we had a lot of great guests, and looking forward to kind of thinking back on some of those conversations. I think that they were impactful to me, and I hope that they were impactful for our listeners.
Yeah. And so one of the things we do is we take off for the summer. So this will be our last episode that we'll be releasing until the fall. We'll pick up with season 5, and we've got a great season coming in season 5. Looking forward to having some fun guests on. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. So what we do with these recaps is we just kind of go episode by episode talking about some of our key takeaways from the time together and from the guests. So episode 1, we had Lisa Slayton on. She was local. We did that in person, and it was a lot of fun just to talk about her view of impact. One of the things I really appreciated was she referenced this formula of impact equals force over time. And so often we think of force, and maybe not often enough thinking about time and what does it look like to actually, you can have a really great impact with a low force over a long period of time. So what were some of your takeaways from that?
The conversation with Lisa, I thought, was one of the more fascinating ones we've had in a long time, primarily because she took a different angle on impact and, just sort of a new approach, even thinking about it from a negative sense. Like, what is it like to have impact in a way that's maybe unintended, or what are the unintended consequences, the ripple effect of impact? Mm-hmm. Also, she kind of talked about the thing about impact versus influence and like how those things interplay together. So I really thought that was an impactful conversation for me.
Is that not your dad joke?
But it was just a really new paradigm and a really thought-provoking paradigm for how to think about the impact that we make. It's something that we think about a lot in our business. And so, I was just grateful for a new perspective. How about you? Anything stick out to you?
Well, yeah, fascinating discussion around impact and the ways in which you can create impact, both good and bad. Money is one of those ways you can create impact, and money has been used for a lot of good. Capital has been used for a lot of good, and capital has been used for a lot of bad. So I really appreciated her taking that perspective. Although one of the things that wasn't actually related to impact at all, well, maybe a little bit, that I took away from Lisa's talk was this concept of pausing before making a decision. So, the time between getting information to make a decision and making a decision, there is a moment in there. And, you may have heard, hey, between like stimulus and response, there's a moment. And that moment allows you to just pause and take a breath.
Yeah.
And I think that pause helps that impact or that decision to be even more impactful, because you can think about, hey, why do I care about this decision, and what is the impact it's going to have?
Yeah. Lisa was talking about her book that's coming out before too long. And she tells a story to illustrate that point about her husband when he was a kid and he was out at sea as a sailor, and he found himself in a moment of fog. And her book is all about how you navigate these moments where you're caught in the fog and you don't really know whether it's left or right, or which way you should go. And it's that pause, that discipline of taking a moment to kind of listen to what's around you that is able to inform the right decision. So it's super meaningful. That's actually a story she shared with me years ago that I've kept with me. And I think it's just really insightful. So, yeah.
Love it. Well, we could keep talking about that for a long time, but we got to move on. 8 episodes to cover here. So episode 2, we had Denny Boyle on. Denny was really fascinating. And we caught him at a fascinating time too, having just gone through a major transition in his professional life. So what were some of your takeaways from Denny's discussion?
Well, anytime I get some Denny time, it's a good day. Denny is one of my favorite people, and he's just so thoughtful. And that's really one of the main reasons we wanted to have him on. He's an investor with Virgo, and his process of evaluating whether or not he wanted to invest in Virgo, I thought was just really interesting. I was on the side of selling him to become an investor, and he just asked such a unique set of questions. He really took a personal approach of wanting to get to know us. And what emerged from that experience, but then also what Denny talked about on the podcast, was being values aligned and thinking about when you're deploying capital, specifically wanting to have a deep sense of alignment of like, yeah, we're going in the same direction. We care about some of the same core things. And if you're doing that, then the likelihood that decisions you're making or the capital you're deploying will have the impact you want is significantly greater. So that was my main takeaway from the Denny conversation, is just, he seeks out alignment in everything he does. He wants to spend time with people with whom he's aligned and invest as a coach into people that, he's aligned with in terms of the things that they want to be about. So that was my main takeaway. What about you for Denny?
Yeah, that was great. Honestly, the concept of alignment is something that I still think about a lot from having discussed it in that podcast episode. And one of the things I really love about alignment is thinking about it in terms of our various stakeholders. So definitely aligning ourselves with our investors. And Denny talks specifically about that, aligning incentives with, the principals and the investors, things like that. But obviously aligning things like core values as well, something that folks just don't often enough think about. One of the things I think about it too is just aligning all of our employees in a direction. So, we run our organization on something called the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And I love these 2 pictures I've seen before. One is you have a picture of a bunch of arrows going a bunch of different directions. And that's what it looks like when you're not aligned. And the other is all of those arrows going in the same direction. And so when you have that energy, just the benefit of getting all those arrows going in the same direction can have huge, huge impact and influence on, getting everybody rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, for sure. And I would attest to it. It's a superpower when you do have alignment. It creates unity and a new kind of energy, and it's a special thing to witness.
Yeah, love it. Episode 3, we had Joseph Woodbury. He's the CEO and founder of Neighbor, and they're doing some really interesting stuff. I mean, thinking about full property monetization is what we kind of talked about there. What were some of your takeaways from that one?
I thought that was a really fun, insightful conversation. For me, that was kind of a space that I just knew nothing about prior to the conversation with Joseph. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's just super innovative. I think hearing how he thinks about that is impactful. It was interesting. I do think it's extremely impactful. It's really at its core kind of elevating stewardship and resourcefulness and, making the most of what you have, which is a part of what we think of when we try to be impactful in our investing. So, yeah. And I also just thought it was, an interesting sort of innovation and in a sense, sort of the sharing economy, coming to play in real estate. So loved it. I think what they're up to is really interesting. Excited to continue to follow their story.
Yeah, really good. I think too, just the concept of, like, honestly, something I had never thought about is there is often empty space that could be generating income within my real estate, like within my house, my garage, whatever it might look like. We have a bunch of apartment buildings, and just thinking about like leaving money on the table again just connects to this concept of impact. Like how can we really increase our impact in our investments? Thinking about, not leaving money on the table, making sure we're capturing every bit of income, reducing every bit of expense. Really, in real estate investing, I've always felt like you win in the margins. Like it is a game that's played in the margins. And so I love that he's just taken an innovative approach to that.
Yeah. And honestly, solving a problem. It was interesting for me to learn about how many people need storage space. And this is
Yeah.
a more economical way for them to, solve a problem that they have in their life. So loved it.
Yeah, really good. Episode 4, we had Sabrina Osso. She talked a little bit about making sure that residents were getting the respect and the safety that they needed. So really a different spin on real estate operations than we typically talk about. What were some of your takeaways there?
I loved the vision and passion that Sabrina brings into what she's trying to do in the real estate space. I connect with it in the sense of, we know it's a real problem. We've invested in some, tougher communities where we witness some of these kind of problems that are just a part of life at certain properties. So I love what she's up to. I think it's a beautiful vision. And we're kind of exploring how we might be able to leverage some of her work in our properties. So yeah, I mean, I also just found it very insightful and educational. She was talking about something that not a lot of people are talking about in our space in terms of, wanting to address issues of domestic violence and abuse, and just, it's not fun stuff, not stuff that you hear people talk about a lot, but it's very courageous that she's trying to tackle that project head on.
Yeah, it's important work. And I love that she thought about, just this concept of making respect and safety non-negotiable. So, when you have a resident, for example, that is violating those terms of respect of other residents, being able to have some teeth in the lease that says, hey, you know what, we're not going to stand for that here at our property. We believe that respect is a non-negotiable. And so therefore you can't stay here. I think taking that kind of hardline approach provides a great opportunity for landlords to not just be investors in the real estate, but be protectors of the residents.
Yeah, I love that.
Great. Well, episode 5, we had Jordan Berry on, and I know you were excited about this one because Jordan does laundromat investing, and it sounded like you had maybe looked to dip your toes into the water laundromat investing yourself. So what did you learn about that one?
Tell you what, I thought Jordan was really fun. He was just an interesting person to have on, tons of experience, and a unique kind of experience that we don't get to talk about a lot historically. So yeah, I tried to buy a laundromat at one point, came very close. And one of the things that I realized as I was coming close to the finish line with that was just how much work I thought it was going to be. And I got into the deal in the first place because I thought, no work. Like it just,
Yeah.
that's all money, no work.
Just like everything in life, right?
And Jordan, was able to shed light in a really practical way and how that is just not the case with laundromat investing. Like if you're going to do this, you need to be ready to roll up your sleeves and like work. And so, yeah, but I enjoyed hearing his perspective. I do think, he's achieved a level of success because he's kind of like figured out how to do it. But he was really honest about the fact that it wasn't easy and it didn't go well the first, time or two he tried. It took a lot of time and lessons learned. And now he's kind of figured it out, but there are no shortcuts. So that was one of the kind of clear takeaways for me.
So good. Yeah, no shortcuts for sure. And just on the impact side, one of the things I really loved was he talked about how laundromats are today's community centers. And I loved how he thought of his asset as a critical component to the community. Like people meet at the laundromat and like connect there. And community happens to be our company Burgo's word for the year. And we're thinking about community and how communities can actually create thriving in the residents there. So I just loved his perspective on building community as well within the laundromat investing space.
Yeah, I totally buy that. Various times, and connecting to it personally, various times in my life, I've had to use laundromats, didn't have access to washer or dryer or whatever, and there are very different kind of laundromat experiences. Some can be really bad, to be honest, and most of mine are really bad. And so to hear someone who's taking the approach of like, no, we want this to be a really good experience for our customers. We want to like prioritize the customer. I think it's kind of turning the whole model on its head, and I would bet on it to succeed. So yeah, very clear impact that they're having.
Yeah, great stuff. Episode 6, we had Zach Malone on. This was in person. This was the one, unfortunately, you weren't there in person, but boy, do you know a lot about this space, having come out of the venture capital world. So Zach, being a partner at a local VC company, thinks about investing and thinks about the impact that they're having investing in small businesses. What were some of your key takeaways? Anything maybe even just from being in that space for a while?
Yeah, I mean, I was sad to miss that one. I consider Zach a friend. I really respect him and respect the work they do. And in fact, he and I entered the venture capital industry the same year. We were kind of the two new people in the space in Pittsburgh. So we grew up together a little bit. And I just really respect the desire to have impact. His firm in particular has been uniquely focused on some ways to have a particular type of impact. And I think, to be honest with you, I think venture capital is one of the most clear ways to be impactful in the world, by picking a space that you think has a chance to kind of, dent the universe and really change things in humanity for the better. Venture capital can do that in a really unique way. So I loved hearing Zach's thoughts on that. VCs, some are more intentional than others in terms of wanting to, really care about more than just the equity multiple and IRR that they're getting. And Zach's one of those people that does think deeply about how's this impacting communities and how's this impacting humanity for the better. So
yeah, no, I love that. And one of the things, just speaking of that, impacting humanity, impacting the community, one of the things I really appreciated, and honestly I hadn't thought about before, he talked about, yeah, sure, the business is going to have impact as a business, but think about the impact on the employees as well. And, one, you're obviously generating jobs, which is huge. If these companies that they're investing in generate 100 or 1,000 jobs, that's a big part of the economy. But two, even if that company goes bankrupt, the experience and the learning that happens, I just loved thinking about that. Like when you allow for a startup to be an incubator of education for the next generation, we are really providing real life experience for those people. I love thinking about that.
Yeah, I love that too. I think it's so true. And the other thing that I think that Zach and his firm do really uniquely is they think specifically about geography and like what's good for a place. So if I'm investing in a Pittsburgh company, is this thing good for what Pittsburgh needs in this moment? And they do the same in other markets. Yeah, I just think that's such a unique angle. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, so good. Episode 7 was Sam Adams. And this was, again, just, there's the diversity of our guests is so interesting. This is, again, just very different because he's in the public market space and doing sustainable investing. So what were some of your takeaways from that one?
Yeah, really fascinating. Hadn't really ever spoken with, at least on the podcast, someone who is focused on the public market space. First of all, I just really respect the fact that he's trying to tackle that. He's building a firm from scratch and they've had really good success and good traction. They've got their own fund that you can invest in public markets. And I really just appreciate the discipline that they've shown in wanting to think critically about, where the capital is being deployed. How are they measuring? I think, one of the things with public companies, because there's so much data that they release, you can probably be a bit more intentional on the measurement side of saying like, are these companies demonstrably doing the kinds of things that we care about? And they've built a model that enables them to, in a pretty direct, like empirical way, make those capital allocation decisions based on data. So yeah, really cool.
And one of the things I loved about that is what they then do is they show, hey, these companies that are doing these sustainable efforts are actually performing better. And so they highlight the top performers on both sides. It's, hey, this is a company that's investing in sustainability and they're actually performing financially better, so that the laggards will see that and hopefully follow suit. So I just loved he's just he's taking a data-oriented approach to fixing a real problem. I mean, talk about impact. That's impact for generations and generations to come.
Yeah, one of the other interesting things I thought he talked about was how interested the CFOs of the public companies are in the work that he's doing, because his research, I think, is demonstrating to them, I can actually help you be a better company if you make a choice to care about these other, what might be perceived as sort of soft factors. But by investing in sustainability, you're going to become a better company and be more profitable. And so those CFOs, he said, all of a sudden he's got their ears. So very cool.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. All right. And last episode this season was episode 8, Lane Kawaoka. He has this wealth elevator concept, which I thought was just really cool, thinking about how the needs from a financial standpoint of an investor change as you sort of go up this elevator or maybe up this ladder of wealth. What were some of your key takeaways? And by the way, I know you think a lot about personal finance and, financial planning and stuff. So I'm curious to hear, what did you think of that?
Yeah, I thought it was a fascinating concept. I mean, intuitively to me, it makes a lot of sense, but it's not something that we've necessarily spent a lot of time like being intentional about thinking, okay, well, what does that mean for how we do what we do? But, I think that is a very practically helpful concept for people to think about as they're on their journey, wherever they are. Think about, where am I? Almost that pause thought, where am I? Look around. Okay, what makes the most sense relative to my specific situation? And I think it's just very, very sound wisdom. And honestly, it does have me thinking about, what we do here. How can we create products that are able to meet people where they're at, to be really suitable for various, risk profiles, various appetites for return, things like that. So it was really insightful. He's got a bit of a different investment model. It was interesting that he talked about, traditionally using third-party managers as opposed to vertical integration. So, just interesting to learn from someone who takes a different approach from us.
Yeah. And I always learn, I think diversity of thought is one of the most important things to success of any organization. And so I think just thinking through, hey, what are the various perspectives on this particular topic? And then assimilating those down into making a decision is just a good way to make a decision. So I totally agree. I loved hearing a little bit of divergent thinking, but also, some thinking really on a sophisticated level around wealth and investing. Yeah. Cool. That was it for season 4. Thank you guys so much for joining in. Thank you for listening in. We're grateful to have a nice base of listeners that join us for these episodes. And we hope you all have a great summer, and we're looking forward to picking it back up in the fall.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Real Returns podcast. We hope that you learned something new about how you can invest to make a lasting impact on those around you. Please be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you listen to your podcasts, leave us a review, and share about us on social media. We hope you will join us for our next episode, where we will be continuing the conversation around impactful real estate investing.